I want you to imagine that instead of me, it's you right here. I want to hear what you are going through. And I know what's happening. Your mind is going, you're not worthy. You have nothing to say. You have no experiences. That is absolute bullshit. That is your brain. You tell it to be quiet. So you heard it from me today. Turn your camera on and share your magic with everyone.
So, voice actress Morgan Laurie posted this on her Instagram recently. She's someone that I've taken classes with at iLight Studios in Dallas, somebody who has a career in anime, which is something that I've wanted to get into, and it motivated me to make this video. Hi, my name is Caesar Castillo. I've been an actor for 6 years, and I'm here to share what I've learned. Now, this isn't going to be a masterclass on acting. I'm not going to teach you how to make a perfect self-tape, and I'm not going to coach you on winning industry strategy or anything like that. Instead, this is a look back on my journey. What happened to a guy who lost his job during COVID and stepped into a world that he knew nothing about to chase a crazy dream? I'm going to talk about the mistakes I made, the lessons I learned, the goals I achieved, and the ones that I'm still chasing. So whether you're still starting out, or somewhere in the middle of your journey, or even if you've already built the career that you were aiming for, I hope that you'll find something in my story that you resonate with. Now, when I set out to start my career into voice acting, I had a very specific goal. I wanted to be a voice actor in video games and anime. I grew up in a time before voice acting was commonplace in video games and before the big anime boom of the early 2000s. I did grow up in Honduras, where anime was actually a lot more common and less niche. Things like Dragon Ball, Knights of the Zodiac, Robotech, and other things were commonplace and played in the same cartoon blocks as Batman the Animated Series. At the time, it was the flashy animation that caught my attention. But as I grew older, stories are what took center stage for me, and I would consume them in any medium they came in. Anime held some of the best stories that I'd ever heard, and I wanted to be a part of that. The animations were complex and beautiful, the stories were ambitious, and the characters had a lot of heart. A lot of anime, compared to things in the West, had a continuous story plot in which you would see your protagonists go through trials and eventually become better versions of themselves. And man, you just had to cheer for them. I loved watching Ash Ketchum declare that he was going to become a Pokemon master before stepping up to a new challenge courageously. It touched my heart when I watched the Elric brothers sacrifice so much for each other while wrestling with questions about power and what it means to be human. I was at the edge of my seat watching Yugi Muto face off against impossible odds while holding steadfast in the belief that the bonds that we share were the things that evil could never overcome. Now, at the time when I was deciding that this was the case, I was in theater in high school and college, but the option of working in the anime field as a voice actor didn't really cross my mind until much later. Initially, I started as an artist, wanting to draw my own comics, create my own manga, create characters and worlds for a video game. And I worked on that for a while, but eventually I found out that my heart really wasn't in it as an artist. When I discovered that, I didn't know where else to turn, so I did what a lot of people do. I went to school, got a career, and started working a 9-to-5 because that's just what you were supposed to do. The big change came along in 2020, when a little virus turned our whole world upside down. It affected the entire world in ways that I would argue that a lot of us are still reeling from. But it also created the perfect conditions for me to realize what it was that I wanted to do. Picture this. You have been at your work-from-home job for 7 years. You're comfortable. You're making a decent living. You just got married. You just moved into a brand new apartment. Life is good. Suddenly, the world shuts down. At first, it felt super surreal to everyone. This can't be a real thing, right? We're blowing things out of proportion, right? It's like Y2K all over. All of us are just gonna isolate for a little while, and then after that, we'll be back at work like nothing happened. My job was not considered essential to my company. Investors started pulling out, clients started panic canceling their orders, and suddenly, management had to cut costs wherever they could. I was let go with a nebulous promise of, hey, we'll call you in 2 months, see how everything's going. It was a scary proposition, and no other jobs out there were hiring anyone because the world had shut down. They didn't have physical storefronts where people could go. So I had 2 options: lay on my couch and stare at the ceiling, or look for ways to stay busy. I worked out, I watched TV, I played video games, I listened to audiobooks, and before I knew it, something magical happened. Somewhere in the middle of watching Yu-Gi-Oh! For a second time on Blu-ray, something clicked. The series was suddenly not just passively playing in the background while I panicked about my future prospects. The story had captured me again. The performances had sucked me into the narrative. I was suddenly feeling the same exact excitement that I had the first time I watched it in high school. When I worked out, I was listening to The Adventures of Harry Dresden on audiobook, and I was holding my breath as every new development happened. I played a Fire Emblem game for the first time and fell in love with the world and the characters. And so, right there on my couch, as I led the Black Eagle House to victory against the Church of Saros, as the music reached beautiful crescendos, and as each voice actor was pouring their soul into their performances, I discovered what I wanted to do. This is where it started. I made plans. I knew that I wanted to be a voice actor, but I wasn't clear on where I wanted to start. So, I started by emulating one of my favorite storytellers of the time, the Dark Somnium. I started a YouTube channel called The Midnight Bard, and the idea was simple. I was going to tell horror stories, but I was going to go all out when I did. I was going to create a persona, the Midnight Bard, this horror host who would tell you the story, but first, he would give you an intro. He would give you something to think about. There'd be music. There'd be sound effects. It would be a theater of the mind experience. I figured this is where we start. We get enough practice here, then we figure out a way to audition for anime, easy peasy. And if it gets monetized along the way, well, then we're just winning. Being a content creator taught me a whole lot of things, and here's where we encounter our first lesson. Lesson 1. You're going to be bad at first. That's okay. You get better with practice. Running a YouTube channel is a lot of work, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You're constantly looking for the next idea for content. You're writing descriptions, you're creating thumbnails, you're promoting on socials, and all the while you're trying to figure out how to make an algorithm like you. There's a lot of unexpected things that happen when you're on the path to reach your goal, and here's where a fun one happened for me. I started trying to promote my content on social media, and I started following other creators who were doing the same things that I was, just kind of trying to get a feel for what would be a good way to promote myself. And suddenly, I made friends with one, and then another, and then another, and then another, and before I knew it, I was part of a group. Here's the crazy thing. The world is super small, and whenever you find yourself amongst a peer group who all are chasing kind of the same goal, what ends up happening is that you meet people that you never would have believed. Like I said, I started my YouTube channel kind of emulating one of my favorite storytellers, the Dark Somnium. And along the course of running my channel, I actually got to collaborate with him. It was actually super exciting. And though the weird thing is that it happened because a friend of mine asked him to be on a video. She, at the time, was my editor and didn't tell me about it at all. She said, hey, listen, would you mind if I invite someone to collab with you on this next video? And I said, yeah, sure. Just show me the finished product whenever you're done. And so as I'm watching what she put together, I said, is that the Dark Somnium? And she said, yeah. And I'm like, Lesson 2, community is important. My time as the Midnight Bard taught me a lot of things. It challenged me to step out of my comfort zone, to try things that I never would have considered before. And the honest truth is that a lot of the things that I was doing at the time just would not have been possible if I didn't have a group of people who had similar goals, who were encouraging me along the way. People that I met during that time have become lifelong friends. We've driven 4 hours to meet each other. We visit during the holidays. We text each other constantly, and they hold a very special place in my heart. They helped me break out of my shell and understand the kind of performer that I was. I'd been making YouTube videos for about a year whenever I first found my way into narrating audiobooks. And beyond narrating audiobooks, I started looking at gig platforms online like Fiverr, where I found additional work. I found my way onto true crime podcasts and fiction podcasts, and as all of this is happening, I started thinking to myself, audiobooks, fiction podcasts, audio dramas, this is it. I loved audiobooks. I love fiction podcasts. I love audio dramas, and suddenly I'm in them. I started thinking to myself, if I make it onto a big roster, we made it. Come to find out, that's a lot easier said than done. Lesson 3, almost nothing is ever as easy as it seems. There are limitless paths ahead of you, and each of them holds great potential, but you also have to learn how to deal with their unique terrain. Audiobooks take a long time to produce. You have to read them, and then if you don't have an editor, then you're editing them yourselves. You have things that the client will want you to do a second pass over. Audio dramas and fiction podcasts require you to be able to imagine yourself in a scenario because you're acting by yourself inside of a box. All of these are skills. You learn them as you go. They're unique characteristics of the path that you are following. Here's where another weird turn happens. Somewhere in the middle of that, I'm auditioning for voiceover work. I'm on Backstage.com. I'm on Fiverr. I'm on all kinds of different platforms. And then suddenly, out of the blue, someone reaches out to me and says, "Hey, how would you like to be in a commercial?" This felt weird to me because all of my profiles were strictly voiceover. And suddenly here's somebody saying, "Hey, you want to be in front of the camera?" I'm a paranoid guy, so that made me super suspicious. Lesson 4. Given what show business is, given what the acting industry is, there's a lot of people out there looking to take advantage of rookies and hopefuls. You should probably get into the practice of reading the contracts and the fine print. I personally do it all the time. Even if I don't understand what I'm looking at, I will do research to try to figure it out. The last thing you want to do is sign on to a contract and be on the hook for something that you never thought you'd be agreeing to. So when somebody sent me the contract for this commercial, I read it from beginning to end. I don't remember how many pages it was, but I remember it was more than 10. And so I'm sitting there with the contract and with pen and paper, and I'm reading what the contract says and translating it into normal people speak, not contractees. So that way I could look at it at a glance and say, this is what they're offering, this is what they need from me, and this is what I'm getting paid. Also, I did research on the people reaching out to me, something that I would also suggest doing. Never assume that somebody is who they say they are on the internet. But I got lucky enough to find out that these were legit people. This was a legit offer. The commercial was shooting in my town and it was paying quite a bit. So I decided, you know what? I never would have thought that I'd be on camera, but this is an opportunity to do so. I think I'm going to try it. This kind of opened up the world of acting for me. Suddenly, I wasn't just a voice in front of a microphone anymore. I was a person in front of a camera. And being the inquisitive person that I am, while I was on set, I talked to everyone I met. I learned everything I could. I asked questions that felt a little silly at the time because here's the thing, I'm kind of new at this. I've never been on camera, and suddenly here I am on set for a commercial, and I don't know what does you guys' path look like? How did you guys get here? You know? There was a lot of information that I got that day, and it gave me a lot to think about. It was a night shoot, so we got there at like 10 p.m. and we didn't leave until like 7 in the morning. And here's something that I should make mention of. Whenever you're on set for something IRL, there's a lot of downtime. You will be sitting down doing nothing for hours at a time. Bring something to do. At 7 a.m., I'm driving home, and I have some things in mind that I'm thinking about. First off, I should look into more commercial work. That was a whole lot of money for about 10 hours worth of work. Holy cow. Secondly, I never considered agency representation. I should look into that. That kind of became the labor for that year. I was looking to get represented by an agency. I was looking to get more commercial work, and that required me to do research. There was a lot that went into that. Next thing I knew, I was in classes. I was in workshops. I had professional headshots. I had a website. I was doing research into talent agencies in my area who might represent someone like me. And soon enough, I was signed by one. And I thought to myself, this is it. Only it wasn't. Having professional materials, having stuff that you can put on a resume, having professional headshots, a website, is all well and good. However, the goal is still over the horizon, and there's still a lot of work that you're going to have to do to reach it. Lesson 5. Always make sure that you're vetting your opportunities and the offers. You don't, like I said before, you don't want to end up in a situation where you agreed to something that you don't want to do. However, if things do check out, try something new. You never know what you're going to click with. As a matter of fact, I would have never realized that I enjoy being in front of the camera as much as I like being in front of the mic if I had not taken the commercial opportunity. So years pass. I'm continuing with content creation. I'm narrating audiobooks. I'm submitting to every opportunity that my agent sends me, and at the same time, I'm searching for what I can find on my own. One day while browsing Twitter, I see a casting call by an indie developer who is making a classic Resident Evil style game. And so I decide to go for it. I look at the sides, I do my performance, I send it into the developer, and I forget about it. A few weeks later, the developer reaches out to me and says, "Hey, we really loved your audition. Here's the thing. How would you like to play the primary antagonist in the game instead of this NPC that you auditioned for?" You ever see one of those Tex Avery cartoons where a character is so shocked that their jaw literally hits the floor? I think I might have done a really good impression of that. I think that my email back to them was something to the lines of, yes, please? So they show me a picture of the character they want me to play. They send me the script. I read through it. I'm super excited. I record my lines and submit it, and I think to myself, this is it! Only the game was still in development, so all the work that I did would take a while to actually see the light of day. Lesson 6. Social media is a great place to find work. There's a lot of indie developers, indie filmmakers, indie animators who love to post their work on there. And additionally, sometimes they like to post casting calls for whenever they have a project that's coming up. For a long time, the grind looked a lot of the same. You find auditions, you submit auditions, you find leads, you follow leads. But it was getting a little difficult. When you're pursuing acting, and everyone around you can see you chasing lead after lead, following rumor after rumor, trying to find the next peak, but ultimately having nothing to show for it, they can get a little concerned. And they'll try to help by asking if maybe this is a path you should be following at all. They mean well. They really do. The truth is that careers such as acting, dancing, singing, performance can sometimes feel like you're doing a whole lot of work and have almost nothing to show for it. People who aren't on the same grind as you can't understand what that's like if they're not on your end of it. I can say things like, I've been on a commercial. I've narrated 10 audiobooks. I have agency representation. I have collaborated with huge content creators. And ultimately, that means nothing to them. Of course it doesn't. They don't understand what any of that means. For example, I don't know a thing about baseball. If somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I've worked my way through the minor leagues. I signed with a good organization. I'm getting called into spring training with the big club." That's an awful lot of things to say, and because I don't know anything about baseball, all I can understand is that they did stuff. I have no frame of reference for how close they are to becoming a pro or how well they're doing. Acting works the same way. Lesson 7. Sometimes you'll be making a lot of progress that makes sense to you. You will be hugely aware of the leaps and bounds that you're making, but people on the outside will not understand. It can make it a little bit of a lonely struggle, which is why community is important. I must have been acting for about 4 years when I had added things like being on a horror mockumentary series on streaming. I think it was Amazon Prime, as well as performing live for audiences as part of a murder mystery troupe. In these situations, I made a lot of connections, made a lot of friends who remain friends to this day. At this time, I'd also dropped my first agent and found a different agency that represented me in a way that I felt better suited me for the stage that I was at in my career. There's a lot of nuance that goes into agency representation, and that can be a video in of itself. Leave your questions in the comments. I'll answer what I can to the best of my knowledge in a future video. This was a time when I truly felt lost for the first time since I'd started. There comes a time in everyone's career where you feel like you followed every lead, exhausted every option, and suddenly you find yourself in this void where it just feels like everything's silent and you're just not moving. Lesson number 8. Careers will have peaks and valleys. Sometimes you'll audition every day for a whole week, for a whole month, and then other times it will be radio silence for longer than is comfortable. That's the nature of the beast. Feeling like I had nothing else that I could do, I did something, again, that changed the trajectory of my career. I Google searched, how can I get involved in acting in my city? There are moments in your life where everything clicks into place so perfectly that you can't help but wonder if this is exactly where you were meant to be. The very first search result was an organization called AMU, Actors Meetup. And as it just so happened, they were preparing an anime dubbing workshop. Having nothing else to do, I decided to attend. I met a lot of peers who were headed towards the same goal that I was. I met mentors who would help me to become a more efficient version of the actor that I wanted to be. I learned a lot about the industry here in my area that I didn't think existed. So I went there, I listened, I learned, I practiced dubbing, and to my surprise, at the end of the workshop, they say, hey, we are actually holding the auditions for dubbing with Sentai Filmworks. I thought to myself, this is it! I mean, how much more perfect can an opportunity be? I was in the right place at the right time. I had been practicing for this for 4 years. I was ready. I went to the initial audition. I had a monologue prepared, I had my materials, my headshot, my resume. A few days later, I got the email saying that I had moved on to the second phase of auditions. This meant that I was going into the booth, that I was going to do a cold read for all of the casting directors there. I couldn't have been more excited. For the week leading up to that, it felt like my skeleton was going to jump out of my body. The audition process was great. Everybody was fun. All of the casting directors were fantastic. It was a good time. And, as I was leaving, I had a very good feeling about this. And then weeks went by. Kept in touch with all of the friends that I'd made at the workshop, the ones who had auditioned with me. We messaged each other over Instagram, asking each other, hey, have you heard back yet? Constantly. Whew, man, it was tense. I found out later that a lot of them made it and I didn't. That hurt. For a lot of reasons. First things first, rejection always hurts, especially when it's something that you've been chasing for a long time. I mean, you practiced, you prepared, you were ready, you went there with your game face on, you were at the right place at the right time. It felt like this was it. But you still didn't cross the finish line. And whenever you trip at the finish line for something that's been your goal for so long, it does something to you. You start to spiral a little. What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Did I understand the script correctly? Did I understand direction correctly? What should I do next time? Will there be a next time? And if so, when? That's just the start of it. It gets a lot more complicated. As I previously mentioned, I became friends with everyone at that workshop. We were chatting online. We went to the same places. We hung out. And suddenly I felt like I'd been left behind. And that's a complicated feeling because these are friends. I love these people. I'm proud to watch them succeed. But suddenly it feels like I'm not good enough to be in the same room. Lesson number 9. Rejection will happen. It doesn't mean you're a bad actor. It doesn't mean that you're not talented. It happens. Casting has a very specific idea of what it is that they're looking for, and sometimes you're just not the right fit. It hurts. That's normal. The best thing we can do is continue to practice and continue to prepare for when the opportunity shows up again, because it will show up again. Here's the thing about me. I've never been one to dwell on falling down. I mean, I'll trip, I'll fall, I'll complain a lot, but I'll stand back up and start trying again. It's who I am. It's in my DNA. Somewhere in that darkness of feeling that I'd failed, I started to think about all of the anime protagonists that inspired me, all of the ones that I'd hoped to voice someday. They too chased seemingly impossible dreams. They'd push through adversity, rise to new challenges, become a better person than they were the moment prior. And their sight always remained locked on the dream. They often faced defeat, moments of despair when everything seemed lost. But the thing that always made me smile, the thing that always warmed my heart about these stories, was that the journey always gave them everything they needed to prevail. Training arcs where they worked hard to sharpen their skills. Battles where they had to learn to be smarter and stronger. And bonds that provided them with the love and support that they needed when they didn't have the strength to go on alone. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was living the kind of story that had always made me cheer. I had started chasing a crazy dream in my 30s during a pandemic, stepping into a world that I knew nothing about, but I was determined to find a way. The years that followed saw me hitting milestone after milestone, reaching places that if you had told me about years prior, I would have never believed. I had become friends with people who had been chasing the same dream that I was, and they'd crossed that threshold. They'd reached the other side. I was proud of them. I loved to watch them succeed. And I learned that their success didn't mean my failure. Quite the opposite. It meant that the goal was attainable. It meant that it was possible. Lesson 10. Success isn't only one thing. It is the coming together of every step you take, the amalgamation of every time you decide to push forward instead of give up. Anime and games are still a goal to me, and those goals still matter. But I've stopped defining my career and my success by one destination. I started off by trying to be one very specific type of actor, and the journey removed those limits from me. This year, I decided again to do something that I'd never tried before, and I auditioned for a traditional theater play, which I got to perform in. And I didn't stop at one. Before I started shooting this video, I was actually at a callback for a Shakespeare in the Park production. Where will I be next year? Who knows? At this point, I'm just going where the journey takes me. And if you're on the same path that I am, if this is a career that you've decided to pursue, I encourage you to keep reaching higher and higher. Never give up. Break a leg out there.